You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove. For all the latest Buckeyes news, analysis, reaction, and the best Ohio State community on the entire internet, head over to BuckeyeGrove.com or follow us on Twitter at Ohio State Rivals. Without any further delay, it's time to get unscripted, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom! We get some meatloaf!
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
I am the one who knocks.
Good Monday, everybody. Welcome back to the Unscripted Ohio podcast, presented by BuckeyeGrove.com. I'm your host, Kyle Lamb, with co-host Kirk Barton, as we recap Ohio State's huge 40-28 victory over TCU on Saturday night. We've got a lot to talk about, so Kirk, let's dive right into it, my man. What were your impressions of the Saturday night game? Kind of a wild first half, actually a wild second half too. Interesting roller coaster type of game, really.
Yeah, I think it was one of those games that was, it was a good test, but it was a game where TCU didn't really have the horses to really make us pay for certain things, and both teams made mistakes, and we were able to capitalize on some major plays, in succession, where we really kind of turned the tide in the third quarter. And I was just happy for the guys. It's really hard on the road. It was Dwayne Haskins, other than the Michigan game, but his first as a starter, big test as a quarterback, and and he played well. If we cleaned up some miscues, I don't think it would have been very close, but it's good to grind one of those out on the road and see some guys step up and make some plays.
So, there are so many directions we could start here. I want to start with this because you're an offensive lineman and you have more familiarity with this. So, I want to ask you about the snaps from Michael Jordan last night. I mean, at least 7-8 times, had a low snap, and just flirting with danger. First, I want to ask, is there something in the game that can really be done about that? Because there were a lot of people, on Twitter asking, why is he still in the game? Why haven't they corrected this? And why
is he still in the game? He's like a top 15 round draft.
Yeah, exactly.
Top 15 overall pick. Yeah, that's why he's still in the game. But.
Yeah, I know that's. I mean, for me, that was kind of a frustrating question, but I understand the frustration in watching that. What can be done in that situation? Is do they talk about it on the sidelines? Can you go back and do extra snaps? When you're over there on the sideline.
God, if there's ever a question that I'm an expert in, it'd be this, because, it was like when Coach Meyer first got there in 2012. I mean, we had Corey Linsley snapping, we had Pat Elflein. I mean, Pat Elflein had been a guard his entire life. Like, all these guys, Michael Jordan was a tackle, a guard. He never snapped a football in his life until March. And, it's one thing to snap a football when it's like you and your buddies standing at a tailgate and being like, oh, look, I can do it. But then when you have two good defensive tackles, you have linebackers blitzing the A gap, you have, potentially, issues in protection where, you're sliding to the left and they're bringing two linebackers from the right, and, you got to get that, switch with the quarterback. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into just snapping the ball. It's not as easy, people can do it in their living room, be like, oh, well, this is so easy to do. But, when you got to maul a guy, and you got a combination block up to a linebacker, and he's a good player. TCU's front, they have some very good players, and it's something where it's just a muscle memory thing. We've had issues with, a lot of guys. Doug Badish in 2006 in the Michigan game, he rolled a couple snaps back there, almost cost us the game. So it's he'd been pretty good with the snaps all year, and then all of a sudden it reared its ugly head at the most inopportune time. It almost cost us the game in the 1-versus-2 game. And, Michael Brewster had issues, Corey Linsley had issues. Other than Jack Mewhort and Pat Elflein, most guys have had issues, with the shotgun snaps. And it's not, all it is practice and muscle memory. A coach once told me it's like starting a lawnmower. It's like when you envision pulling the cord on the lawnmower, that's kind of the same motion that you use to shotgun snap. But, it's just something that, Mike's got to work on. And I'm sure that, just knowing Coach Meyer, that's one of those things where it's 10,000 reps. He was real big on for some reason 10,000 reps is what would make your muscle memory form. And I'm sure Mike's going to be snapping on his off day. He's going to be snapping today. He's going to be snapping after practice. It's just one of those things where it's not a very physical motion, but it's just building the muscle memory to the point where you don't even think about it and you just do it.
I think if there's a bright spot here, it's the fact that they were either all low or on the low side for most of the night. It's more correctable than if you're just all over the place, right? I mean,
well, yeah, I mean, you want, obviously you never want to snap to go anywhere, but low, at least the quarterback can fall on it or pick it up and throw it. But if it's an airmail one, when it goes over his head, then you lose 15, 20 yards. You might have a turnover. You might have a turnover for a touchdown. I mean, it's just one of those things where obviously you want to right in the window every time, but it's going to be one of those things that's going to be tough to watch in film because I'm sure he'll get a negative mark on every single play with a bad snap, and he won't have. I doubt he'll have a winning performance, but that's up to Stud and Coach Meyer because we used to grade pretty hard on bad snaps, but I'm sure Michael's our best offensive lineman. There's a reason why he's been all Big Ten. There's a reason why he's an All-American candidate, and his ability and the ability of the 5 best players being on the field is something that we just had to do. And he was our best candidate to play center, and he'll improve his snaps. I'm excited for his future because having a guy who's that big and powerful at center is pure luxury at this point.
Dwayne Haskins definitely passed his first real test, and I know some people will point, second half of Michigan, that was technically his first test, but as a starter. Yeah. This was his first, chance to showcase himself, and he passed with flying colors. And what's really astounding is he passed 24 of 38 for 344 yards, 2 touchdowns, and that's despite, literally at least 5 or 6 drops, mostly from Austin Mack. I want to talk about the Austin Mack thing. It just seemed like, man, after he dropped that first, pass in the end zone there on that first drive, he was just a wreck. I felt like it was just all psychological with him after that because he would catch that ball 99% of the time when it hits his hands, and for him to have 4, 5, 6 drops in that game was just, you could tell it was impacting him.
Yeah, and that's something that I think that Coach Meyer and Ryan Hartline have to get with him on just to get him straightened out because football, as much as it's about being physically gifted and physically tough, it's a mental toughness game. It's a game where, when you're a receiver and you drop a ball, you got to be still demanding the ball and wanting the ball in the next play. You don't want to be shying away from it. Or if you miss a block in pass protection, or if you, get beat in coverage, you have to have a short-term memory because, when those things happen, everybody sees you, everybody's kind of on you. And you just got to forget about it and have amnesia and go to the next one. Because Austin's obviously a talented player. Coach Meyer generally puts his best receiver at X, and that's where Austin's lining up. And, it's one of those things where they've got a lot of confidence in him. And, he was the catalyst on the very first drive. He made some great plays. And, obviously he's got the ability. Because when you're starting at that spot, you've got to be the guy. And, I'm sure that, he'll get that stuff ironed out. And, we've seen players in the past that struggle with, drops or fumbles. And they iron it out and they turn into – high, next level picks. So I think Austin's got that type of ceiling, and I'm sure that they'll work with him hard this week.
Kyle Lamb and former Buckeye captain and Buckeye Grove staff member Kirk Barton co-hosting here the Unscripted Ohio podcast. We've got Ross Fulton, staff analyst, coming up here in just a few minutes, and there are a lot of things I want to talk about with Ross. So I want to hold off some of these questions here until Ross joins us, but. So, Kirk, another thing I saw that I was really impressed with was the performance of the offensive line. Once again, we talked about this last week, but, Banogu, that defensive end, Ben Banogu, he's a legitimate, first-day NFL type of talent, and Thayer Munford did a tremendous job on him. I think he got one pressure early in the game, and I don't think he was heard from again the rest of the game, which is really impressive because he's a really good talent. That TCU front, in fact, did not get to Haskins all night long. All the pressure that TCU got on Haskins was from blitzing. They were not able to get any push up front from that front. If we had questions about the offensive line still coming into this game, I'm not sure, at least for me, I'm not sure I have too many remaining. I thought they really answered the bell.
Yeah, it's a thing on the road where it's been good that Thayer's been able to hang in there in pass protection, and Isaiah has been good. And, part of it, a big part of it is putting Michael Jordan at center. You've seen a pattern with Coach Meyer the last few years. He's moved his best player to center, and it's worked out really well. And then you get a kid like Malcolm Pridgeon on the field, and, Meech Knox has he's got some experience now. And, the thing that really humps us is, obviously, we're tight zone, offensive line football team. And, we like to hand the ball off to Mike Weber, hand it off to J.K. Dobbins, come off the rock, really wear down the line. But, when we're in passing situations, Dwayne gets through the ball pretty quick, which is one of those things where, people like to attribute sacks to offensive linemen. But, I mean, if you got to look at the whole picture, you got to look at the quarterbacks, you got to look at the receivers getting open. And Dwayne can get rid of the ball. I mean, with his arm talent, I mean, he can just flick it and it's gone, and he avoids pressure and he avoids taking, nasty hits and that type of thing. And he's been as big of a reason as our offensive line's been good as anything. And, we're just thankful to have a guy like that back there because it's all a big orchestra, I mean, so to speak. And, I'm real proud of those guys. They get maligned when we have a less than, I guess, exemplary performance, but I'm just happy for Thayer. I'm really happy for Isaiah just because he had such a rough sophomore year, and our fans just don't, they're not very forgiving, when they have a couple rough games. And he's a super talented kid. He's a great kid, and I'm just really happy for the way he's performing this year.
Ross Fulton is here with his whiteboard to break down what the Buckeyes and their opponents are doing on the field. Can't see the whiteboard? Close your eyes and imagine really hard. It's time to go inside the X's and O's with Ross.
Pain heals. Chicks dig scars. Glory lasts forever.
All right, we've got Ross Fulton now joining us. Ross, welcome to the party. It is an interesting game, and we saved a lot of our best stuff. We talked about a few things here before you came on, but we saved our best stuff for you, so you should feel privileged.
All right.
Oh, absolutely.
Very excited.
So let's start with the defense. Kirk and I have been talking a little bit of offense, and we'll circle back around to because I've got some things I do want to ask you about. But defensively, gosh, where do you want to start on this performance? Because it was a kind of a roller coaster ride for Ohio State on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, to be honest, they did a pretty decent job, and I thought they tightened down the second half. It just obviously with the 93-yard run being the big exception, but TCU literally opened the playbook up on. I mean, I think they probably had upwards of 40 screens and reverses last night because they couldn't ever really run the ball inside.
I want to tell you what I saw, and you guys are welcome. Ross, I'll start with you, and then Kirk, you can chime in on this. But here's what I saw. I thought the Ohio State defense really got exceptional. I shouldn't say exceptionally, but played it a lot better as the game went on. I thought the first half, the pace really seemed to affect everybody. I think they weren't ready for TCU playing as fast as they were. I'm sure they expected a quicker pace, but I think they were caught off guard those first several possessions at just how fast TCU was going. I thought as the game slowed down a bit, Ohio State's defensive line took over, number one. I thought the linebackers, Malik Harrison and Pete Werner, played really well in the second half. It's almost like Malik Harrison was struggling to recognize things while the game was going breakneck speed. But as it slowed down, it seemed like Harrison was all over the field. Once it slowed down, he started recognizing things a lot quicker. And so I think other than maybe, the very back, a couple issues with the safety spot that we've been talking about so much, I thought the defense really started to play a lot better as the game went on with that, the 93-yard run notwithstanding. Ross, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, I agree. I start first from the premise that in modern college football, when teams are running upwards of 80-plus plays, you're not going to shut people out. You're going to give up some yards. TCU used the tempo to their advantage, not only just for the speed aspect of it, but to catch Ohio State in personnel groupings. So, for example, the first drive, they got Ohio State in base and went really fast and did not substitute. So Ohio State had to play all those bubble and smoke screens with their three linebackers on the field. Conversely, on the 93-yard touchdown, they did a nice job. They lined up. They gave Ohio State a look where clearly Ohio State was expecting a pass out of that formation, and they were in nickel man free, and so they got, they had everyone spread out of the box. But as I said, Ohio State was able, to your point, to slow them down because, again, TCU couldn't really establish the run. And so when Ohio State could get them behind the chains, they had to slow down. But I agree that the linebackers played better as the game progressed as well. And they had really tough job with all those edge plays.
Yeah, Kirk, you're more than welcome to chime in on that.
Yeah, I just, with the tempo thing, I always, worry. It usually takes a couple drives for the defense to settle in and kind of get used to it and catch their wind. Because it honestly reminded me of the Oregon game, championship game, where that first drive, I mean, it was like incredible watching their tempo and how fast and how crisp they were. And I was like, we looked like the first drive, we looked helpless, but then we kind of settled in and we shut them down the rest of the way after they had that first initial touchdown. But it's, this is like a thing where the depth really shows for Ohio State. I mean, not many teams can withstand losing Nick Bosa and still have a playmaker like Draymond Jones, change the entire game by picking up the shovel pass and running it back. And, as to Ross's point, it's one of those things where you just, speed and smaller bodies is now the critical thing. Smaller linebackers, fast safeties, playing nickel 80% of the time is the way to go now, man. Because as soon as they catch you with three linebackers in, they're going to go tempo, and they're going to have a tight end that could probably split out and play receiver and block in a bubble screen. And then you got to have guys that aren't necessarily as quick twitched as you'd like out trying to defend that, and it makes it tough.
Kirk, have you ever seen a shovel pass, pick six shovel pass by a defensive lineman like that? I don't know.
It's just tough, man, with a guy like Draymond, because I mean he's just such an athletic. I mean he's a defensive end that we like to move our ends inside to tackle, and I mean my God, the way he ran away from the quarterback and the running back, you're just like, shoot. You're gonna be rich. I mean,
you mentioned the Bosa injury, and obviously, we're just waiting to see. The original report was a lower abdomen strain, and lower abdomen in this case, I think, was code for groin. Because I think it's pretty clear. I think it's pretty clear from the way Nick was signaling last night. We know what happened, but we wait to see the severity of the injury. But man, we knew Ohio State's defensive line was really, really good, and for them to still dominate and take over that game with Bosa out of the game last night. Draymond Jones earned himself some money for sure.
Yeah, and Jonathan Cooper stepping up, getting a sack, QB hurry. It's just nice to see a kid like Cooper who's been a good program kid and he's been around for a while, and he was able to step in, and we obviously have Chase Young who's going to be the next potential Nick Bosa type talent, and it just speaks volumes to Mark Pantoni and the job he does evaluating and recruiting, and just kind of how we really don't miss as often as we used to, just based on how thorough our evaluations are. And, plus obviously Larry Johnson, coaching these guys up. It's amazing. I mean, Nick Bosa is the best player in the country, and we were still able to survive losing him, which was, it's devastating, but I hope Nick's okay. Cause I mean, I've known that kid since he was a, ninth grader, and it's hard to see a kid like that get hurt when he's such a good kid and from such a good family. But yeah, I'm just happy for the guys, able to withstand that.
Ross, I know from seeing your Twitter timeline last night, I know you have something to say on that second safety position. Jordan Fuller played a really, really good game, but the other spot not so much. If there was any doubt as to why Ohio State seems to be trying to push Shaun Wade into that safety spot, I think last night was we saw it. The corners I thought were not too bad. Damon Arnett got picked on a little bit early, but I thought that first touchdown pass he gave to Reagor, I actually didn't think that was his fault. I mean, he was there step for step until he basically got his jersey shoved like right in the chest, and he got pushed away. Reagor made a great catch, but that was only because he was using his other arm to push Arnett off while he was catching it with one hand. I thought Arnett actually didn't play bad. I don't think he played good, but he didn't play bad either. But that safety spot, man, I think if Ohio State can get Wade into that transition and make him the other starting safety, I really think their secondary will be a lot better for it.
Yeah, the corners are fine. I mean, again, I go back to you're not going to bat 1,000 as a corner when teams are running 90 plays and throwing back shoulder throws. Those runs. I mean, it's the same thing with the Oregon State game. I mean, there were breakdowns up front on those runs. The linebackers took the bad angle, but the difference between a 25-yard run and a 93-yard run is Isaiah Pryor sitting there flat-footed and getting beat to the edge. And the same thing on that. When you have a middle of the field safety like Wint was on that touchdown throw, you can't literally block your corner from making a play and not make the play yourself. I mean, that's that throw should never be completed against the middle of the field safety sitting there.
Well, and that play was interesting because he did a great job recognizing it at first. He got back there. He covered a lot of ground and got back there. Great job. But it's like when he got back there, he was just out of control. It's like he never made a play for the ball. Like you said, he ran into the corner. I mean, he got back there. That's half the battle. But when he got there, he messed that play up pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is I think that Shaun Wade's one of their best 11 or however you want to put it needs to be on the field. I mean, he played quite a bit nickel yesterday, but you're obviously not going to be in nickel quite as much as they were last night in general. So I think that if he could play safety, I mean, that's obviously asking a lot to transition during the season, but I think that would be a benefit.
Kirk, before we transition over to the offensive side of the ball, because I definitely have several more things I want to talk about, but defensively, I want to recap this. And I see this isn't really to worry too much about what Michigan fans or Penn State fans or Michigan State fans, but in general, I see a lot of people saying, well, Ohio State's defense is vulnerable, and I think that's fair. I mean, there are certainly some things Ohio State's defense needs to sharpen up before they get into the bulk of the Big Ten season. But it's interesting because I don't think this game is a very good litmus test for what we'll see going forward. I joked last week about all the delusional TCU fans that said, well, speed, nobody can match our speed. And I joked about that and poked fun about it. But I will say this, after watching this team against Ohio State, I don't think there will be a team in the Big Ten that can match the team speed across the board that TCU had against Ohio State. And when you combine that with the pace along with all those playmakers, if Penn State or Michigan State or any other team has success against Ohio State, it won't be because of anything we saw on Saturday night. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's speed-wise, that's the fastest team we're going to see all year. I mean, we've seen, Penn State almost lost to Appy State. I mean, Michigan's not looked very fresh. Wisconsin took the L. Michigan State lost to Arizona State, in that late-night game last weekend. And, it's one of those things where, they were an impressive team. I mean, if we don't have a few plays that, that were extraordinary, I mean, they easily could have beaten us. If they are 1 yard further back on the brilliant kickoff return play where they had the off returner laying down in the end zone so you couldn't see him. I mean, I loved the design of that because we've run the cut kickoff since Urban's got here. And I always am like, there's got to be a way to get it across the field because then you're immediately outflanked. It's like when they threw it across the field, I mean, he had 4 blockers that didn't even touch anybody that escorted him in the end zone. And it was like one of those things where, we were fortunate on that play that they didn't execute it correctly. And they obviously, when they're in practice, they couldn't compensate for the type of speed that we had on our kickoff team because I think the guy got nervous and he threw it forward instead of backwards. But there's no one in the Big Ten that really makes me super nervous. Obviously, playing at Beaver Stadium's the hardest venue in the country to play in. So that'll be a test in 2 weeks. But it's going to be one of those things where, after a game like last night and getting Coach Meyer back and hopefully getting Nick Bosa back healthy and, other teams' attrition, like I feel good about where we're at right now.
Okay, so Ross, I want to ask you, I know you and I were both talking about this on Twitter last night. We were talking about what appeared to be the read option and Haskins was handing it off every time. But, apparently after the game, Ryan Day said in the post-game interview that those were actually designed runs. Now, you watched this back. And I know you and I were both on the same page watching it live, thinking, there were 3 or 4 times it looked like he could have kept it and had a big gain on the outside. What do you think on that after watching that back?
Yeah, I actually agree that they were mostly not read plays. They were either a lot of times what they would call crunch, what Dave mentioned, which is split zone, having the tight end block back on the backside defensive end, or what they call cab, which is basically he's on the backside, the tight end's base blocking. Or the third option they were doing was trying to go 4 wide and spread everyone out so that basically the offensive line could just base block the remaining players, but they were largely not reads. That did not stop TCU, though, from bringing backside rifles, essentially, with the backside, what TCU calls their strong safety coming off the edge.
Okay, so my next follow-up question then, because watching it live, it looked like the ends were pinching down. And if you leave them unblocked, that would be the time, obviously, you would read the end and you would keep it and go to the outside. And the outside was definitely there. So I guess my question is, Is it maybe I don't want to say a bad play call, but a questionable play call because it doesn't seem like the lane was open in the middle with the middle being crunched in so much. Sorry to use that term. I know if that's the term of the play, but it just did not seem like there were any running lanes to run that play in. It seemed like the off tackle was wide open. So what made that play look so bad when we were watching it live?
Yeah, and to their defense, I mean, they ran increasingly so a lot of gap runs, particularly counter Trey away from the rifle players on the backside, which were pretty successful because, they're just going to have to be without a running quarterback. It sort of changes what you can do, and you just have to be a lot more diverse in your run game. But I think, I'd be interested in Kirk's thoughts as well. But at some level, it just tight zones their base play. So you can't just totally go away from who you are. So I think they tried to mix and match, and they broke a few of them, particularly when they got spread out. But, yeah, it was just going to be difficult because TCU, based on formation, was going to just keep bringing those guys off the backside.
Kirk, I want to ask you, so they're running these plays, and they have the appearance of a read. Do you think that they are setting these up to eventually start, incorporating the read a little bit? Are they just trying to keep it simple for Haskins right now and not have him do too much? What do you think their philosophy is? Because it's clear, they still have Haskins carry out the read possibility. So even though they're designed runs, it seems like they're setting it up to use later. Do you think that's what they're doing here?
I think to a small degree, but just given Dwayne's skill set, they might actually call a read 1 out of every 10 times. The purpose of tight zone is, it's for one, it's to get Mike Weber leaning forward, it's to get JK, and it's to get our O-line coming off the ball and splattering guys. And you just have to hope that, Dwayne's fake as he's reading the end can hold the defensive end long enough, for JK to get to the line or Mike Weber to get to the line. It's just, for us, it's an attitude play. You get to get a good combination block up front. It's an easy block for the front side tackle. And, ideally, if you read the end or if you can hold the end, you get 2 good double teams on their D tackles going up to the 2 linebackers, and you can really kind of wear down their defense. Because if their hallmark is speed, then that usually means they're not very big. I know that they had a big nose guard that got hurt, and they usually, they have some bigger guys, but those guys get tired of getting pummeled and in combination blocks by a guy like Malcolm Pridgeon and Mike Jordan on the front side, and then Isaiah and Meach on the backside. That wears guys down, and you can see it as the game progresses that the physicality of our offensive line really it pays dividends, because we wear guys out, and JK and Mike Weber get stronger because our guys are grinding meat up front.
Yeah, and you saw, obviously the touchdown run was critical, and that was what they call Bible. So again, it looks like you're going to run split zone, but the Y-off lets that guy go and loops around to sort of lead block for the quarterback, and he kept. And I just don't think you're going to echo Kirk. I just don't think they're going to run a lot of replays because that's just not really fitting Dwayne Haskins. But if you can do it occasionally in situations like that, to where a defense has to at least respect it, that's ultimately kind of what you're going for.
Oh yeah, most certainly. I don't want to
real quick.
Yeah.
If we get Tate Martell in the game, we're running reads.
Yeah,
that kid's out the gate.
Yeah, that's very true. I was actually I kind of thought that they would, because early on when TCU was blitzing a lot, they didn't blitz as much in the second half, but when they were blitzing a lot in the first half, I actually thought as Ohio State was struggling there, they would bring in Tate to run a read and maybe try to catch him over aggressive a few times. Obviously they didn't feel like Tate was ready for that, but I kind of thought at the time they might try that to take advantage. But Haskins, Ross, Kirk and I touched on this, but we haven't talked extensively about it, man. He's the real deal. I don't think we had any questions, but in the back of your mind, you do want to see it against a team like TCU, a fast defense, a talented defense, guys that have NFL prospects up front. And Haskins wasn't rattled. He did not make any throws that were rattled by pressure whatsoever. He made great decisions. He was hit at least with 5 or 6 drops by his receivers. It was not quite a flawless performance by Haskins, but very, very close.
Agreed, and he's also not going to see a more complicated defense than what TCU gives you. they split the field in half. They'll run different coverages to each side. They'll banjo, which means they'll switch off men, crossing each other. They'll do all kinds of things. So to be able to, as you said, stand in there, as you said, it wasn't flawless. I thought actually, early that the Barry, he just needed to put a little air on that, and he walks into the end zone completely uncovered on the opening drive. But that said, he was on point pretty much the entire game.
Yeah, the only two that one, the Barry, and then the Victor, the deep ball. If he leads Victor walks into the end zone as well. Those are the only two mistakes I thought, throwing the ball that Haskins made. But otherwise, even despite some pressure, like I said earlier, I didn't think TCU's defensive line actually made an impact on Ohio State's offensive line. I think all their pressure came from the blitz. But despite that, there was just really a couple throws. Kirk. Is there any reason for trepidation with Haskins? It seems like we have enough evidence now that this is what we're going to get from him.
Yeah, I honestly, just based on how he's trending now, I wouldn't be surprised if he's the number one pick in next year's draft. To be honest, this depends on who holds that spot, but it's, when you sit around and you watch the other quarterbacks and you watch their arm talent, you watch their makeup, he's a good kid. He's got it all, and I'm enjoying. I think this is probably going to be our only year with him, just because it's a very weak quarterback class, and generally if a team's trying to switch it around, they're taking a quarterback at number one, and I just don't see a guy who's better than he is, and he's been, he's just been phenomenal, and with his package of his release, his awareness, his size, most teams trend towards taking a bigger guy, because in the NFL you're going to get hit, so you got to be a little more sturdy. And I think the kid's got it all, and I love how the players rally around him, and our receivers are making plays, and it's been fun to watch. I'm real happy for the guys, and he's a good kid, so he's easy to root for, and I'm just happy with everything that's going on with our guys right now, and I'm happy Coach Meyer's back, to be frank.
Kirk coming up, and that's a perfect segue. That was exactly what I was going to say next. We've got Ohio State and Tulane coming up on Saturday, and there's not really much to talk about with this game. I wouldn't put you guys on the spot. There's no point. This is going to be a shellacking. But Urban Meyer will be back on the sidelines on Saturday. So, Kirk, I had some apprehension maybe before last week that when Meyer got in, we might see a little bit of a different philosophy when he has, final say on play calls. But I'm starting to think now, I really think, especially since he's been involved in the game planning the last 2 weeks, I think we're probably not going to see any changes with the offense, going forward as Urban Meyer returns. Is there any reason to think we'll see anything different now?
I don't think so. You got to remember, when he was at Florida, from Tim Tebow to John Brantley, he didn't run the same stuff. It was a totally different outfit, and he designs his offense based on the skill he has. And the other notable thing is Coach Meyer at any level has never called plays before. I know that he's a head coach and he gets final veto power, but he's never called plays before. So it's been, Tom Herman or Ed Warner or Ryan Day with Kevin Wilson or whatever makeup they've had. And I can't see that changing just based on how successful it's been. Coach Meyer, he might, he'll have input, especially if it's 4th and 1, or, he'll say, hey, if it's 3rd and 6, hey, we're going to go for it here. So you got 2 downs to get 6 yards, click over to defense and say, hey, we're going for it here. So just get your guys up and ready to go in case they stop us, which usually, they don't. But he, or if we're going to go block a punt, that's, that's kind of his call. That's kind of his thing. But, he's there as a leader, as a master motivator, and as a guy who's, really it's his offense, but, Kevin Wilson and Day's handprints are all over it. So with a kid like Dwayne Haskins, you just don't want to break it. The kid's so good that you just want to compliment him and keep the ship rolling.
Ross, I think it's fair to say, with a trip to Happy Valley lingering just around the corner, the goal this week is get Nick Bosa healthy. I would be shocked if we see Bosa play. Even if he's cleared, there's no reason to. Get Bosa healthy, get Sheffield healthy, any other lingering injuries that came from Saturday night, get them healthy, get a big lead on Tulane early in the first half, get the starters out of there, and look forward to Penn State, right? I mean, that's the goal.
Yeah, I mean, normally I would say this would be like a classic letdown game, but with Meyer returning, that may sort of negate that. But yeah, I mean, I think the two things, if I just may add on the last couple of points, the first thing is, in addition to Haskins, I thought the offensive line really, again, silenced a lot of doubters. I mean, as you said, most of the pressure that TCU got came from overload blitzes where they just can't, the offensive line can't pick him up. But in terms of recognition, I thought they did a great job of picking up the closest rusher. So, that guy had to come from the furthest edge, which gave Haskins time to get rid of the ball, picked up a lot of stunts and twists, and pretty much stopped any pressure. So, yeah, I mean, so to your point, you want to keep that improvement going. And then, yeah, I mean, just get everything settled in with Meyer back on the sideline. I agree with Kirk that it would be, they're not going to run Haskins because to be frank, he can't really do it. I mean, he's not really a fast switch athlete. If you wanted to run the quarterback a bunch, they'd be playing Tate Martell. So, it's going to continue to be a little bit of a work in progress on short yardage and red zone situations without that quarterback run threat. And that's probably the area they need to work on the most on offense. But yeah, you basically want to get everything tuned up and get ready for Penn State.
Well, we've got Ohio State and Tulane at 3:30 on Saturday. I know a lot of people are frustrated with that time. I think most people wanted a noon game. These bloodlettings seem to be better for noon games, but unfortunately for Ohio State fans, that will not be the case on Saturday. But then Penn State the following week, that's going to be the big game. And Ross, we may get you back. I think you mentioned the possibility of coming back on next Friday. We'll obviously have you guys back Monday to talk about what happened on Saturday, but Ross, I would like to get you back next week to preview the Penn State game as well, if that's okay with you.
Sounds good. I'm happy to do so.
So, guys, I appreciate this was a lot of fun. We got to do this again next week. Kirk, Ross, appreciate you coming on, taking the time out of your Sunday. I know we got to get some. I know Kirk especially want to get to the NFL games here, but I thank you for taking the time to talk some football.
It's awesome, man. I really enjoy it. Thank you.
Yep, happy to do it. Thanks, guys.
That's going to conclude the Unscripted Ohio podcast for today. Thank you for joining. Reminding you that you can catch us Monday and Friday on BuckeyeGrove.com. Please also follow us, subscribe, iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher. Rate and review us when you subscribe. That would really help the show out as well. So you can catch us again on Friday. I'll have Mark Gibler of Buckeye Grove, and also we'll preview the Tulane game as well. You can catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. That's going to do it for today. Again, catch us again on Friday. Same bat time, same bat channel. Thanks for listening, everybody. Go Bucks.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.